So, Paul, Mary articulates really artfully what the Republican political and rhetorical strategy is. It's to find the space beyond what used to be a normative border of acceptable rhetoric, right up to speech that crosses the line into illegal incitement of violence, and just plant roots, build their bunkers, and that's where they hang out. And you and I have had a lot of conversations about the asymmetry in language. I wonder how you assess, the rhetorical response to that.
Well, the threat of civil war, I think, is exaggerated. And it's something that people like Peter Navarro are actually encouraging and want to root on. I think the threat of extremist violence is real. I think the threat from what I've called not a civil war, but an American insurgency is real. It doesn't take 18 million people to coordinate attacks on infrastructure or political leaders or disrupt our government or our elections. So I continue to look at this as a national security story, not just a political story. It's an entire extensive network from Trump to Navarro to Mike Flynn to the Oath Keepers all the way around that don't necessarily have to be coordinated. They just have to have the same objectives. And sometimes those objectives are just chaos. And when you've got any number of people who are angry, who are politically motivated, who share values and have weapons and have consistent messaging coming from people like Peter Navarro, it's a real threat. So the FBI has got to be on guard. I always remind people, the FBI is still looking for attackers from January 6th. The pipe bomber that set pipe bombs outside the DNC and RNC is still at large. The FBI is still hunting for people who are participants in January 6th. So the threat is real. And I think the reality is also that there are people like Peter Navarro who want to see it increase.
Paul Wyckoff, what does that look like in action? Because I know you sort of sit at the fulcrum of peering over into two abysses, if you will. What does that sound like?
Well, I think that there's a core point here, which is a lot of Americans are up for grabs. I wouldn't dismiss it as just something that only people on the right or watching Fox News can latch onto. I mean, we're in a battle for hearts and minds. And there are people who are on the fence. You've got to have leaders and messages and messengers and programs that get to those people, that bring them over into community organizing and into nonprofit organizations and away from the Patriot Front and the Oath Keepers. And I think the parallels with 9/11 are important. We've talked about this before. After 9/11, the laws didn't work. Like, they made massive changes to respond to a new threat. And I think we have to face the fact that many of our structures, laws, and policies may not work. After 9/11, we created the Department of Homeland Security. There was the Patriot Act. There was massive change in our entire society to face the number one threat, or at least what was communicated as the number one threat. I think we need the same kind of tectonic shift. It's got to be much more than see something, say something. But maybe our laws need to change to respond to the fact that someone like Mike Flynn, the former national security director, is openly calling for violence consistently. Yeah.
All right. To be continued, please. Mary McCord, Maya Wiley, and Paul Wyckoff, thank you so much for starting us off this hour. The latest episode of Paul's podcast is out right now. He's joined by our good friend, Amy McGrath, and they talk about how the military is dealing with efforts to restrict abortion access.